What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor Podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. Athletor Podcast coming at you. Zach Tanelli is the guest on today's podcast. Zach is now at Virginia Tech, but for a long time, he was the head coach at Columbia University. And one of the things that he talks about the most is making the transition from a Ivy League institution over to a Power Four school, and the not just the good, but sometimes the bad that comes with that. Not only that, but he talks about his biggest impact on the sport has to do with developing young men. All that and more coming at you on the Athletor Podcast. Don't go nowhere, son. Hey, everyone knows that wrestling is 90% mental. We're super excited to have partnered with Wrestling Mindset, the #1 wrestling specific mindset program in the world. Make sure to sign up at wrestlingmindset.com using promo code Athletor25 for a $500 discount. Stop underperforming and losing to guys that you should beat. Athletor Podcast coming at you. Zach Tanelli, Jersey Giant Zach Tanelli on the horn. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I really do appreciate you taking some time for us.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me.
Okay. We got to talk, man. If I told someone not in the wrestling community that you were the head coach of a Ivy League institution and left that job willingly, by the way, willingly, it's not like you were forced out, willingly left that job to take an assistant's job or an associate head coach's job at Virginia Tech, most people that are not aligned with the wrestling kind of ecosystem would think I and you were crazy. But most people aligned with the wrestling community go, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that's about right. Tell me your thought process on making the move to Virginia Tech.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Mike, there's so many factors that went into it. I'll start just first and foremost. I mean, my family is one of the big ones, right? When I took that job, I don't even think I was 30 years old, and moved to New York, and being familiar with the area growing up there was awesome. It's as close to home really as I could get. Um, but had my fiance at the time and got married and started a family, and that was amazing. Um, and by the time I left, I had my third kid, or we had our third kid, I should say, and living in an apartment in New York City. It's funny. People are like, how could you do that? That would be terrible. Listen, it was great. I enjoyed it. I loved it. We were living in Hoboken. We intentionally had kids in New York City. We were in love with the idea of it, and there are millions of people that do it. That said, it was becoming challenging with the style of life that it takes. That the quality, not the quality of life, but yeah, just the style of life in being a head coach and the demands that takes, and the time away from home, and adding an extra hour onto my day on the front and back end was tough. Having kids that were crazy like their dad. If they were like my wife, it might have been a little easier. But I got three kids that are my children, and run around like nut jobs. So yeah, so I think that definitely played a role. The time that we're at in our life, getting some space, getting a yard, getting a place that had stairs. For Pete's sake, man, stairs were like a novelty to my children. They had no idea what stairs were. So that played a huge role in it. And then, honestly, like you said, I think within the community, or the higher community of wrestling, it's like, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think outside of that, yeah, it might seem a little strange, but to me, it's like, how do you say this? Because I'm super grateful. I'm grateful for my time at Columbia and at an Ivy League school, and getting that experience. And the reality is, there's a lot of people that think they can be head coaches, and until you're there in the chair, You don't know. Like there's no experience like experience, right? So I learned a lot and I made a lot of mistakes and was really fortunate to have some good people I was working with and a lot of the success that we had as a program and leaving that place top 25 for the last 2 years. And shoot, man, that's the oldest program in the country. And I think we had our like only five All-Americans or something like that. I don't know. So getting a guy on the stand, it was a big deal. So I'm super proud of what I did. Um, that said, there are a lot of restrictions and like a very thick glass ceiling above me. So I think being
Hey, don't go anywhere. It's Mike. We'll get back to the podcast in just a second. We got to pay the bills though. Do you have an athlete that's looking to break into the social media space? We at athletorlive.com have a brand new in-depth tutorial done by none other than Caden Henshaw. If you don't know who Caden is, he's not even a Division I wrestler, yet he's got hundreds of thousands of engaged followers. Learn how to create engaging content, grow your followers, and open up new opportunities in the NIL space. Go to athletorlive.com/Caden and we'll give you the first module completely free.
like learning from that environment and being in that environment is something that I take with me as I move forward in my career and a field that I plan on being in for a really long time. So you can't give that experience back. So I'm super grateful for it. But the reality is between the restrictions there at that specific institution, the league that it's involved with, academics, and then you throw in, just geographically, New York City is a hard place to recruit to. We had a pretty specific type of kid we were going after, which took time to develop. Really where we were looking and how we were going to invest our time. Um, but then I think, like, lastly, the landscape of wrestling has changed so much, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But between NIL and the transfer portal and graduate transfers, um, that was something that I need more experience, to get where I'm going. It's like I need more experience in that field. So um, the grad student thing really took a toll on me. We had a really tremendous crop of guys come through, and we were lucky to recruit them and their families, and they did a
And you
great
can't
job.
keep, just so everyone's clear, you can't keep them after they can't compete for you after they
Right.
graduate from Columbia.
Yeah, so I think that was it. It was really weighing on me my last 2 years, knowing that because of COVID and all those guys unenrolled from school, or they just had that extra year from COVID. If they didn't, I was going to lose a lot of guys, and we had five national qualifiers that had to move on. They didn't have the choice. If they did, they would have stayed. I know that. I know that what we built and what they believed in it, but instead had to see him go. So between Nick Babin, who won multiple matches for us at the national tournament, Angelo Rini, who was in the round of 12 this year, Josh Ogunsanya, North Carolina, ranked top 15. Lennox Wallach, who was an All-American for us. Um, and I'm missing another one, obviously.
Yeah, but the point is though that that's a solid core of guys that are just gone because the Ivy League says they're gone.
Yeah, yeah, they're gone, and there's nothing I could do. So it's like it would rip my guts out knowing that, like, the way I coach, like, I'm invested, and like I knew that was coming, but it couldn't come at the expense of what I was going to give them, and like, oh, they're going to go be all American somewhere else, and that's going to be hard. I was going to have to take a different satisfaction from it, and like in a really pure sense, like just doing it to get them there. If and hopefully we were able to do what we did with Lennox and get him at least on the stand once before he went somewhere else. But ultimately, the emotional toll that took on me, um, I feel like I give too much to my athletes to stomach doing it, and it hurt. I know those guys that I left behind, and for lack of better terms, and it hurt me too. But I had to stop the bleeding and get to a place where we can retain our athletes and I could see them from start to finish the way that I intended.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. All right, let me ask you this. Number one, before you took the head job at Columbia, did you know about that thick glass ceiling that you were talking about? Because to be completely honest with you, I know, just having known you over the years, you probably didn't care, number one. But you're also you need to get coaching, like head coaching experience, right? Like that's the number one prerequisite on just about everyone's application, right? Unless you're David Taylor, right? But you have to have that head coaching experience. So did you know about the thick glass ceiling before you got there?
I knew there was a glass ceiling. I don't know if I knew how thick it was. So I'm going to respectfully shy away from going into more depth. Um,
Sure.
you know, again, it's a special place, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. Um, but yeah, there were just things that I didn't foresee. I knew it was going to be challenging. I was up for the challenge. I've said this a lot in previous interviews and in talking with families and stuff. Like there are there are builders and there are finishers, right? Like you're building a house. There's the guys that come in and build the foundation, and then there's guys that come in and put all the ornate finishes on it and the shingles and the doorknobs and everything to make it look real pretty. And in my bones, like I'm a builder and I love building programs, and I think I was, I proved that. So to me, it's like I checked all the boxes um, of what I needed to do and scratch that itch. I proved I can coach. I proved I can recruit and develop and fundraise and do all these things at a place where again, myself and my staff, we were pretty solely responsible for our success. And that's something as a program we ended up rallying around. We didn't have a lot of the bells and whistles that some of these other programs do, or shoot, a director of operations to unburden us from some of the other stuff. I mean, we were wearing a lot of hats. So yeah, so I'm all I can say is I'm proud of it, and I'm super grateful as I look back, and um, left with a good taste in my mouth for those people that allowed me to be a part of it, and the families, and kind of just look forward.
Okay. I do want to move on, but I do got one more question about your time at Columbia. You said you made a lot of mistakes along the way. What was the number one mistake that you think you made while you were at Columbia?
I would think so. Here's the reality, and you know me, and like some of it's me and some of it's just wrestling and some of it's just wrestlers and high performers in aspects of their life or career. It doesn't have to be wrestling. I knew in my bones what needed to change. I had a pretty in my mind and literally written down like an organized like structure for how we were going to get from where we started to where we finished, right? And then beyond. Um, I think being younger, being eager and trying to do it all at once, it's like I probably was almost too aggressive in it. And I guess I didn't anticipate. I thought as we got better, which happened, it would make up for some of my aggressiveness, maybe in pushing that needle to get us where we went. And I think like everything in all aspects of working life, relationships are everything. And
Hmm.
someone said this to me once. It's like people want to do things for people they like. And I
Hmm.
don't think I was unliked, but I think I ruffled a little too many feathers on the front side. And
Hmm.
although those things might have been correct, they might have in the long run, like Tanelli might have been, maybe he was right, or this wasn't the right fit for in that role for in integrating with the team, or and there's so many aspects of being a coach, and so many, especially as a head coach, you're touching so many different parts of the athletic department. Um, that I think I probably learned a lot of how to manage relationships with people and not come in so hot. Um, and like we need it now, and like finessing situations more, if that makes sense. So
It
it
does. Oh,
evolved,
it does.
it evolves, but
I think hold on. I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but if I haven't, so what? I was a small time head coach at a junior college at Middlesex County, New Jersey. Okay. The administration and I did not always see eye to eye. And again, I brought them things that I thought were solutions to problems, when in actuality, what I was doing, and I didn't realize it at the time, of course, when in actuality, what I was doing was putting more work on their plate, and they're not about that. Okay. So something tells me, something tells me that you feeling as though you're creating a solution to problems probably created more problems. Is that fair to say?
Uh, Maybe, yeah. I mean, to an extent, yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word problem, but I created more work, you know?
Mhm.
And as a guy that I view myself as like super accountable, I think sometimes my expectations, I overlook that it's not like that it's more unique to be as accountable as I try to hold myself. As a
Mhm.
leader of men and developer of men and builder of programs, there's an expectation, and I can hold that standard and that expectation within my team a lot easier than I can the surrounding team, if that makes sense. So I think
That's well
just
said. That is some head coach shit you just put together. That's well said.
so I don't know if that makes sense. Although,
It does. No, it makes
if you ask
complete
someone
sense.
else,
Like,
maybe I,
why would you can't hold the same standard for a different set of people. You just can't. And it's unfortunate because we have grown up with that standard, right? Like I look around my house and my kid has you better have that standard.
yeah,
If you said you were going to do it, you do it, and you're going to die trying, right? But we can't impose that on people that didn't grow up that way. It's really
yeah.
hard to, and
So
and and it's challenging.
yeah, it's leaders. It's leadership. I think in my bones, I was always kind of a leader, and I don't think leadership is a funny thing. Like all leadership means is that you have followers, right? So you could be a bad leader, you could be a good leader. I think in high performing uh, operations, businesses, teams, whatever, um, you need the right leadership. And I think within that team, I was the right leadership at the time to get us where we got. Um, but you can't control all the leaders around you, and there's a lot of leaders that go into an athletic department and a university.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I preaching the choir. Now again, it's these are microcosms of what you dealt with at an Ivy League institution, but it was like a fight every day. It was like a fight. I literally got like butterflies in my stomach walking into the building every day, and I know that you can at least comment on that.
I'm not going to comment on that.
But I know you can. All right, fair enough. Let's move along. Now you're in Blacksburg and you're stoked. What's the biggest change going from an Ivy League institution in the middle of New York City? You're on the upper west side, upper east side,
Yeah, West Side.
west side to Blacksburg, Virginia. Aside from the accent, what's the biggest difference?
Personally or department wise?
Oh, I want both. I want both. But let's go personally first.
Personally, let's say this, my first weekend, and I don't even know, maybe I was down here like looking at houses or something like that, or I just came down to meet the team or something. My first memory basically of being in Blacksburg is like going to the 7-Eleven and just grabbing something small. And guy's like, I'm checking out, and he's like, "Oh, hey man, how you doing?" I said, "Good man, how you doing?" And he goes on this tangent for 5 minutes, 7 minutes talking about his mother, and uh she wasn't doing well, and hopefully she's doing okay now. She was in and out of the hospital for some treatment, and he gives me a rundown that I'm just like, holy cow, I would like caught me off guard. I think the overall friendliness, um, the ability to like not have a guard up. I think New York people in New York are great people. There's great people everywhere. but they're
100%.
they're guarded and they're in a
Hmm.
hurry. And
Hmm.
in Southwest Virginia, they're not as guarded and they're not in as much of a hurry. And I think that's a good thing. I think both are good things. And man, I can't like there's so many great people everywhere, but that's probably the biggest thing like personally in my own social life is like adapting to the speed of life is different
Sure.
down here. Um,
Okay, so now what about professionally? Like when you got into the room and you were like, oh, that's way easier.
yeah, well, I think overall here's what I'll say first. Being an athlete at Virginia Tech is a really big deal. And
Mhm.
I wrestled at Wisconsin, and it's one of the only things I can relate it to is like coming from New Jersey, there isn't a ton of state pride, as I'm sure you know. Like you walk down the street, you see a Jets shirt, a Jersey, a Giants shirt, Yankees, Mets, but then you also see Cowboys and Dodgers and Vikings and Kansas City Chiefs, whoever's hot, Uh, when I was at Wisconsin, for example, like I went outside and you were wearing Badger gear. And if you were a Badger, it was like a really big deal. People stopped you, they wanted to talk to you. Um, the furthest extent you saw was like Minnesota fans, right? So Southwest Virginia, Virginia Tech, it's a really, really big deal to be a Hokie, to be an athlete here. They feel as though you represent them, and that's a really special thing to be involved in. Um, Wrestling specifically here is a very much a priority sport.
Mhm.
And we're obviously, it's a big time athletic department, but at this particular moment, wrestling has been the most consistent, I'd say, over the past like decade or so. Um, so the guys are recognizable. I go grab lunch with my wife, which is another big social change. I can see my wife in 5 minutes and have lunch with her as opposed to,
Crazy
not
thought. Crazy
crazy,
thought.
but crazy thought. But
Dude, things that people don't realize though, dude. When you have an
yeah,
hour commute, it's not just the hour that you're sitting in the car, the train, the whatever.
yeah,
It's the fact that you can't go home and have dinner or have lunch with your wife. That's a
yeah,
big freaking deal.
it's a big deal. So like I mean, every time we go out, there's someone that like, I mean, I have a look about me. I don't know what it is, or just wrestling and athletics is just that big a deal. But we can't go anywhere without someone being like, "Hey, you're the new wrestling coach." You talk about the program, and they know the program. That's like the crazy thing. It's not like they just recognize you. The men on our team, it's like they go somewhere and people stop them and they want to talk and they want to be a part of it. They feel like they're a part of it. So it's like you come here and that's a really cool thing. So those are probably the two biggest things, one social, one from the team aspect that probably stick out to me the most.
What about like the day to day? Because there's a big like so. All right, I'm pretty close with Lee Roper, and I literally got off the phone and I had to cut him short because I wanted to talk to you. One of the things that he keeps telling me is I didn't know how hard I was working at UNI. I didn't know. I didn't know that it doesn't have to be a round the clock job because at a program like UNI, which is an awesome program, don't get me wrong, but to get it to that point, it
Yeah.
takes like Doug Schwab does not sleep. Lee Roper did not sleep for 10 years. Lee Roper, and I've told this story on the podcast before, but it's worth telling again. He took a vacation out here in San Diego after the Open in 2022. Do you know that I can't you can oh you can see it, that futon right there. Literally slept on that futon from the day that like the second he walked in my door for 36 hours. The dude slept for 36 hours because the Open was open. I'm not kidding. And like but he keeps on telling me, I'm like, how's Stillwater? How's it going? Like, you got some expectations now. Like, this is a big expect. So he winning Final X was expected, right? You beat Dake already at the Open. You're supposed to win. Wyatt Hendrickson is supposed to win. Jax Forrest, maybe not so much, but whatever. You still have a tremendous amount of expectation. He goes, Mike, it's the easiest job I've ever had in my life. He goes,
Yeah.
David kicked me out of the room. He's like, they force me to take time off. So is there anything in the way of like, holy shit, I ain't got to do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lee's onto something, and again, credit to Schwab and what he's built over there. But it is just there are certain elements. Yeah, listen, we have a guy that's so good as a director of ops that we had to change his title to chief of staff. I mean, Tucker Davidson does so many of the administrative things that I'm used to, that me and my old staff were so like had to do, like just to make things run and operate. Like, he's a big deal. We got Ethan, in social media. Clint Wattenberg is probably one of the most unsung heroes in our program in dietetics and sports nutrition. Guy was a multiple time All-American, oversaw all of the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas for 8 years. He's literally the best in the business working for us doing nutrition. It's like there are so many other people to lift the weight. If it's 1,000, if it's 1,000 pounds that we have to lift, it was spread out amongst four people where I was. And here, if it's spread out amongst eight people, well, that's half as much lifting. So there is a lot more time to kind of, step back and take a breath and enjoy life. So it allows me more time to be in the wrestling room and doing really the best part of the job, which is arguably the smallest part of the job, is like coaching wrestling. Like I feel
Yeah.
like I can coach wrestling for the first time in a long time instead of like trying to squeeze it in. Um,
Right.
so
That
yeah, no doubt.
work
I,
gotten
I, I
away almost.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what he says, what Lee was saying to you resonates with me for sure. Um, it's also really sad. It's a sad thing to hear because you're building programs, and like you said, sometimes you need to take head coaching roles to develop and prove that you could do it to maybe get the next job, and no one's necessarily doing it for that reason. But there's this reality that comes with it of like, there's a reason why. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to say this good. People think it's really easy, and oh, if I have 9.9 scholarships, I would be better than that too. You don't really know the restrictions or parameters that some people are dealing with, and it's a lot. It's hard to be elite. It's not easy to be on top and to maintain that every year. That's hard. It's hard to win a national title. It's harder to defend national titles, no doubt. But when like there's an element of not having the resources or the support that keep people down, programs down more than the outside community um, would really understand, if that makes sense.
I
So
think they're starting to get it though, bud. I really think they're starting to get it. I truly do. And I'm not just saying that. I think really, and this sweet little segue is what I'm going to do here. Um, I think a lot of this NIL, rev share, all these different spokes in the wheel are coming into the collective conscience, the zeitgeist that is the wrestling community. And I think that the layman, the person that is sitting that watches NCAA's once a year, is starting to now understand that there is a correlation between money and success, number one. But
yeah,
they're also seeing that there's a direct correlation between top four programs, 5 through 7, seventh or 8 through 10. They're seeing correlations between these things. And I think they're starting to understand that this is such a multifaceted job description that they can't ignore it anymore. So, what part of the head coaching job at Columbia prepared you best for your role now at Virginia Tech?
well, I'd say I had to deal with a lot of different personalities within the team. Forget about the administrative stuff
Sure,
or like a department that I was talking about before. We didn't have our pick of the litter, not close.
sure.
Um, so we were in a sense, you're like taking chances. Everyone is taking a chance. And listen, you could be the number one kid in the country. You're still taking a chance on them. There's still a lot that needs to
Absolutely.
go right. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of things there's a lot less can't miss guys than you think, or than people
Hmm.
would think. But I think working with a different brain certainly how they're wired. Obviously academics are very important. And as much as we shifted trying to see kids that wanted to wrestle and just happened to be really smart, or I referred to it a lot as like, I'm looking for athlete students, not student athletes. If we're going to win wrestling matches, we needed athlete students. But I think what it did was it allowed me to have, like, I had to develop my patience of how to get people along the path and veer them towards what I believed was the right path for success. It wasn't an instant fix where we were necessarily, and it wasn't impossible. I just didn't have success doing it, of getting a kid that can come in and change the program from day one.
Mhm.
Lennox Wallach took fourth place in the Ohio State tournament. That's the highest he took. I think he placed twice. I think he was a two-time fourth place finisher in the Ohio State tournament. And the guy goes and is in an overtime match away from being in the NCAA finals. Um, but that it was a non-traditional path that he had to take to get there. And he's one example. There's countless others. He's the easiest because he
He's
secured
on the
the
board.
bag and got it done. But it's like it could have been him. It could have been him and other guys. But the reality is, you learn how to coach individuals, and as we're coaching the team, um, you got to coach every individual as well. You hold standards for one, and then you coach. I'm sorry, you hold standards for the whole team, but then you got to coach individual to get them to reach their optimal performance. And that doesn't mean they're even going to be in the starting lineup. But I think the thing I was always trying to do there is create value in how I saw them, how I viewed them, how I treated them. Um, that made them feel like they were giving something to the program, like willingly instead of unwillingly. So I think the ability
Do you
that
think you did a good job of that?
I think overall I did. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm giving myself more credit than I deserve, but I think
No,
as
look,
time moved
let's
on,
just be honest about it, right? Because there were times where I felt the same way, and maybe some other people didn't, but I think that's generally has to be the goal, right?
yeah,
You have to see the value that I see in you.
yeah, I think I look back and I'm really comfortable with the amount of people I still talk to that graduated, the people that have more value and passion for the sport of wrestling. Brian Benino is a kid that no one will know. Brian Benino came to me. He wanted to quit wrestling. He hated wrestling. He was an athlete. He's a guy that had another year left. He transferred to Drexel and is in the round of 12. And I talk
Right.
to him every month. The guy is so appreciative of what he learned, and he hated me at times. And then now, I mean, if I ask the guy to take a bullet for me, he might. I don't know. He might let me get hit
Mhm.
too. I don't know, but like I have so many relationships with these guys that are going to last, and that I stay in contact with, that I feel like I did a pretty good job of that. And that's again, that's a guy that was in the lineup. I think there's other, a guy, the workout partners. Those guys, I think they know how much I valued them and what they brought to the team. So, back to your question, I think it prepared me of like having to deal with kids that aren't just killers, that don't just they need to be national champions or all Americans to like be a success. And that's a whole nother topic of redefining what success is, with these guys here. But I think like it helped me create patience and empathy, um, for them and what they're going through. And I had a lot of respect. As time grew, the one thing I loved most about, working in an Ivy League was like these guys were, they're making a different impact. They are truly doing the academics without any slack, and the athletics, and holding themselves to high standards on both ends. So I think that helped me. There's kids on our team at Virginia Tech that it's very easy for me, like really, really easy for me to see value. And that doesn't mean that anyone else doesn't, um,
No.
because we have a great staff and professionals and everyone does that. But for me, it's like, it's really easy to lean into. I think for most coaches and young coaches, it would be really easy to want to lean into Caleb Henson or Eddie Ventresca, uh, Jimmy Mullen. Like those guys are easy, but I'm not trying to hitch my wagon to those guys. I want to make an impact. And I think it's been really easy for me to try and lean into other kids that might not get as much attention. and develop them. Like I was in a developmental business. So I look at our freshmen and I see fresh meat as far as like I can mold these guys a lot easier, perhaps than guys that have been here, in their third, fourth, fifth year. Um, so I add value where I think I can with a lot of the returners and the studs. And then I try to invest a good amount of time in the young guys that will be studs so that we're prepared when an injury occurs and our second man is called on, that he's not just not giving up six, he's going there to win matches, and have his shot.
It's nice. That's a nice problem to have, right? That you have the backup that can actually compete. It's a nice problem, Okay, let's shift a little bit to the kind of overall landscape of NCAA wrestling slash NIL slash fundraising, that kind of stuff. How would you describe the overall landscape of NCAA wrestling right now?
Um, Chaotic a little bit and disorganized, lacking
I'd,
lacking structure.
yeah, I'd agree with that. The number one thing that we keep on hearing from talking to these coaches is that there's no guardrails right now. There's no guardrails. That's scary in a sport that is as regimented as ours. It's the wild, wild west. What is the biggest change that you've seen going to a Power Four with the NIL stuff, as opposed to being at the Ivy League? It's like kind of different situation.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't able to play with the NIL because it affected financial aid, and you give a kid that's on a lot of financial aid money, and then he's going to have to pay tuition. So I think the biggest change is just literally getting in the game, and more than hearsay of X, little Johnny is getting X from here and Y from there and Z from here. We're in some higher level conversations with families and with kids individually, and be able to know exactly the the nuts and bolts of what's going on. So I think that's the biggest change, honestly, is going from 0 to 60 real quick, in that sense,
Mhm.
knowing exactly
How long
what.
did it take you to adjust?
I think I'm still adjusting. I think I'm trying to evolve. I'm always trying to learn, and that's another reason why I came down here, is to learn. So um, I think anyone that says they've got to figure it out uh, is probably right about to get passed by someone else. So I think we as a staff are always trying to evolve and stay current on trends and being creative. We don't have endless, limitless funds here. So sometimes we have to get creative of how we're going to package things together, and also we're going to have to rely on other things, which I think we've got down, is the relational side, personality, and um, that matters. It matters when you're giving your kids to somebody, as a parent, like putting your kid in the right place where they'll succeed and be guided and develop as men. It's cliche and every coach will say it. Some definitely do it a lot better than others. I've seen that. You see different colors in coaches. I think it's another fun thing to say or to note, is like I was cute in a way. At Columbia, we were developing, we were good, we were a tough team. We had some good wins, and he's doing a nice job at Tanelli. You know, and a lot of conversations with a lot of friends and people in the community have shifted quite a bit in making this move. And now I'm not as cute anymore. I'm a little bit scarier. I'm a
Yeah, you
little
got some
more.
teeth to you. I
Yeah, I'm
understand.
a little
Yeah.
bit more of a competitor now, and that's a funny thing that you see. Um, so yeah, just getting in the game and being a part of those conversations is probably the biggest change as far as that's concerned for me personally.
Uh, so let's talk about 30-man roster cap. Is this a done deal? Is this 100% right now?
Um, I mean, I think it does depend. I think if you buy into the revenue share and stuff, that as far as an athletic department is my understanding.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's largely still going to be up to the institution based on how they go about that. But don't quote me on that. So
Sure, but you mean it's largely up to the institution whether or not they participate in the revenue sharing. Is that what you mean?
I believe so. And then I think if you're involved in the revenue share, then my understanding is that you're at the 30-man roster.
Okay. Is Virginia Tech going to participate in the revenue sharing?
We're still having some conversations about that, but we're still navigating how we're moving forward with the roster and everything over here.
That's good. Turned into a politician on me quick. That was good. Um, all right.
That's what that experience will do for me.
Yeah, it
And,
was good. It
and
was
an
well played,
identity.
sir. Well played. All right. So let's just pretend for a second that you have to deal with a 30-man roster cap. What is the biggest downside to that? Obviously, having 12 more guys in the room, 15 more guys in the room is beneficial, but what is the real kind of ripple effect of that?
But I think it hurts the community. It hurts the ecosystem of Virginia Tech athletics. Like we have say it is 30, right? We have 20 guys that aren't starting. That's it.
Hmm.
Everyone's going to notice the 10 guys that start, the 10 guys that make nationals, the All-Americans, all this. But there's 20 other guys that get them there. There's 20 other guys that are making an impact in a way that no one knows about except for their teammates, their coaches, their parents. And that hurts. It hurts me because I no one gets anywhere by themselves. Um, so there's a lot of value in those. If someone was to rank 1 through 30 on your team or 1 through 40, there's a lot of value in 31 to 40.
Hmm.
When done the right way, if we're recruiting properly and the culture is what you think it is. So I think by quote unquote, or like you trim that off, it comes at the expense of something else. So that hurts me knowing the value of so many kids I've coached that never had the ability to just to put the singlet on and wear the VT on their chest or at previous institutions, like to step into the limelight and have the ability to shine. Um, so it hurts because you coach all 30 or all 40 of the guys, and only 10 of them ever get to do it. So, like you said, it's a microcosm of a lot of other things. But to me, that's the biggest impact it's going to make. Those guys might be able to impact and contribute to the program, whether it's financially or jobs, um, and now we're like cutting ties with them. So I think we're creative and we still have the RTC model, and there's things that we can do to keep those kids around and keep them engaged. Uh, but we have to get more creative, and I don't I'm always weary of being inclusive or being exclusive, and I think if kids deserve and belong, like if they deserve to be there, they belong to be there, and we want to be as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, the number one thing that Kolak kept saying, and he doesn't have to deal with it, right? It's a little bit
Yeah.
different at Naval Academy, but he was at Campbell, which is not unlike, Columbia in the way of, it's not a fully funded juggernaut. But I remember the thing that, and it's something that I didn't even think about. Those 31 to 40 wind up being your biggest donors when they graduate.
Could be.
That's that's hard to swallow when you got to go, sorry, bud, you got to find something else to do with your time. It's really hard to swallow.
Yeah, it's harder for them. You know,
Sure.
really hard for us. It's hardest for the kids, and yeah, a lot of them got here and deserve to be here. So it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you see this going? Meaning, I know nobody has a crystal ball, but and I know you hear and are privy to the numbers that I'm hearing, and if they're correct, is this sustainable? Like, they're talking about, and I'll put a name on it. You don't have to. They're talking about Bo Bassett getting $1 million a year for 5 years. I don't know if it's true. I haven't seen the ink on the contract, but where there's smoke, there's fire. Kids getting money for sure. Is this type of model sustainable for wrestling?
It's as sustainable as donors and alumni and supporters want to make it. You know, it doesn't seem like necessarily the smartest investment, But as you mentioned before, I mean, there's definitely a direct correlation to dollars spent and points scored. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of issues with it, you know, and you mentioned an athlete and um, you know, I can't really talk about him because he's
I
still
know. I
still
understand.
a
We still
prospective.
heard about it.
But
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot of issues, right? And that like a situation perhaps like that hurts other people and you know, that athlete, the word gets out. And like you said, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Um, but it hurts other programs. Like it obviously helps the program that they're going to, but it hurts others. If all offers are said to be similar, well, then it hurts the program, the other programs sometimes that we're in deep because, well, hold on, this is a high school kid that's getting this, and I got guys on my team that aren't even scratching the surface at that. So it raises some really hard conversations um, that you have to have, you know, and I'm not going to do it justice and I don't have the time to go into it, but the reality is a lot of the the hearsay, the forum posters,
Mhm.
they're killing other programs and they're actually preventing other programs from getting better kids um, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Where would
Sure.
I like it to go? I'd say I'd like a lot more transparency in it. I don't have a crystal ball. You know, part of my job is to evolve to work with what's the rule set that's in front of me. Um, so I'd love some more transparency. I'd love a salary cap. I'd love it to be,
Mhm.
if we're going to shift towards professional sports and let's have a salary cap. Let's have an open market. Let's trade athletes. Let's do it that way. You know, but
Yeah.
then at least I know everyone's got to, you know, whether they can afford the $1 million budget or $100,000 if you're using round numbers, like at least I know that national champs are getting this, you know, on the open market they're getting this. You only have a finite amount of money that you could use. So if you're going to go buy a kid, it's going to come at the expense of maybe your other roster. Instead of right now, it's like we got the, you know, I'm a Yankees fan, but it's like you got the Yankees and the Dodgers, and then you know, you got other teams. You got the Diamondbacks and you got all these other teams that they can't compete. It's not a level playing field in a lot of ways. And that's not sour grapes, you know, because we're certainly in the haves as opposed to the have-nots. Um, but I'd like to see a little bit more parity. I think it's great when the Columbia kid's in the semifinals. I think he's got a lot of kids behind him, uh,
Yeah.
you know, rooting for the underdog. And I think
Sure.
that's best for sport in general is when those teams um, can have people on the stand or in the finals or as national champs or all Americans, whatever it is. So I'd just like to see a little bit more monetarization and transparency, you know, as far as
Yeah.
what's going on.
That makes sense. Do you see that happening?
I don't.
I
I
don't
don't have a
either.
lot of faith. You know, we'll see. The House settlement just happened, and you know, it's going to be monitored. You know, now all NIL deals above $600 are going to have to be monitored by Deloitte, and they have a whole team kind of working towards this. So that's essentially everyone on an NIL deal, and they're going to
Mhm.
assess, you know, what your worth is. Um, so we'll see what that, you know, what that does, and um, the repercussions for not reporting or for doing end arounds is supposed to be more severe. So in a large to a large extent, I'm excited to see what that looks like because it does seem like we're trying to, you know, put up some fences, but you know, wrestling and a lot of sports like wrestlers are really creative, you know. So we'll see where this goes. But there's a
The
little bit of
cockroach.
what's that?
I said we're the cockroaches of all sports. You can't kill us though.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked at a school and we had a good like compliance guy there, and they would go to these compliance meetings and they'd have their meetings and then the meeting would stop. It's like the tape recorder would go off in a way. And they'd be like, all right, guys, now let's talk about wrestling. You know, what's going on in the wrestling department? Let's just have, you know, cards on the table and
Mhm.
what's really going on, whether it's the RTC model or now this NIL stuff. So, um, yeah, we'll see where it goes.
All right, Joel Shaw, anything before we get to our sprint?
Bring it home.
Bringing it home. All right, Tanelli, don't think, shoot from the hip, Jersey style. Here we go. What's the best wrestling shoe in the entire world ever, ever, ever?
Oh man, I admittedly not a big shoe guy. Um, I refer to them as work boots. So I don't know. I liked Asics growing up a lot. I think it was the Rulon that I wore.
Okay.
I started wrestling late, so that shoe has a little bit of sentimental value. And I think now it's like the Aggressor. I think they still make them, but to me
Yeah.
that's a good shoe. It works, gets the job done.
Yeah, it is. That and it'll last forever. Those things last forever. All right. If you have all this stuff that we talked about, whether it be the business angle of coaching at a Division One level, excuse me, at a head coaching level, or whether it be just the kind of the assimilation from one place to the next, what's the best book you could recommend coaches read as they're coming up through this sport?
Start with why. I think is a good book. I read mostly like leadership books now and trying to figure out how to be a better leader for my guys. Um, Start with Why by Simon Sinek is really good. And just like, what is your purpose? Like, to me, are we on? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I thought something happened on my screen. Um,
No, you're good.
to me, it was like it just like kind of redefines what your purpose is and what your like kind of what your intrinsic motivation is as far as like, why am I here? We are trying to do something bigger than us. And if your why is to win wrestling matches, um, you'll be successful, but I don't know if you'll be as successful as maybe finding some more deeply routed um, meaning and purpose to your career. Like I said before, it's like you got a team of 30, if that's the number, or 40, only like 20 or 30 of them aren't even able to accomplish those goals that they want. So you better be about more than winning wrestling matches if you're going to make the impact that you want. Because making an impact to 10 of 40 guys is you're only touching 25%, and that ain't enough for me.
I agree. 100%. Okay. Okay, you only get four. They got to be American. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
Got to be American, huh?
Got to be American. By the way, that's the distinction that every single edge kid says. Wait, they got to be
Yeah.
American?
Yeah, I mean, Arsen Fitzayev I'm just going to throw him out. Obviously not American, but I've modeled a lot of my career and um, around Arsen Fitzayev. So, um, American, I think
Ooh.
Um, Lee Kemp, I think is a pretty special guy, and four-time finalist. Kind of was a coach's decision away from being four-time national champ, or an official's decision away, which uh, without getting there's some political things there that I think play a role
We can call it
potentially.
political if you want.
Um,
There's some cultural things, but
so
okay.
yeah, first three-time world champ, kind of a pioneer. I think until like maybe Cejudo, he was probably the youngest world champ or Olympic
Youngest.
champ that we had, I believe. So Lee Kemp is one that's always stuck out, and having gone to Wisconsin. I tried to name one of my sons Kemp. My wife wasn't as crazy about it, but um, yeah, I don't know. I think he should be up there. He should be in the conversation. Uh, I mean, I think you got to put Dave Schultz. I mean, Dave Schultz, I think he transcended the sport. Like forget about what he did as an athlete. Um, he made an impact, and that's a big deal. He made an impact. Um, so Dave Schultz for sure. I hate to give more credit than people deserve, but like, Cal Sanderson is, I forget, like again, like his athletic career is something that um might never be touched again, right? But I think I look at you're starting to see more of the whole body of work now, and you
Mhm.
throw in what he's done as a coach, I think is really a big deal. Um,
Yeah,
so I think Cale Sanderson, what's that, three?
that's three.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's I think, to me, Ernie Monaco is a guy,
There you go.
and that's
There
like,
you
that's a name I threw out for my son, which actually did stick, is Monaco. So I named my son after him, and he's a special guy, and he's a builder of men. I talked earlier about, you know, builders and finishers, and the guy's a builder. And when you look at the product of human that he's created, it's not matched. And I think it's a lot of where my philosophy for wrestling comes, and building the foundation is he played the long con with everybody. He certainly had a good eye and great technique and everything. But the funny thing is, when I sit in a room and I got, Zach Esposito and Matt Valenti and uh, Glenn Pritzlaff and whoever, Mike Gray, it doesn't matter. Like, you look at all these, everyone's kind of a high achiever. Um, and whether they were different styles of wrestling doesn't matter, because we're all wired the same way. And sometimes success doesn't necessarily follow that. But man, I'll tell you, if I were to sit down and talk with Steve Mako, or Kurt Backus or Corey Cooperman, or who, like, the list of Edge kind of alumni, I guess you could call them. The common trait in all of us is kind of how we're wired mentally, how we deal, like the perseverance, the how we deal with setbacks, and the resiliency. So many things that, like, the guy is a molder of men that this sport doesn't have enough of. So to me, maybe people don't know him, but to me, he's definitely on there as well.
He absolutely should be. And you want to just talk about impact, just pure impact on the sport. He has left a crater around New Jersey that will not ever be matched, because it's too big of a hole. It's really impressive the amount of impact he's had on this sport. Okay, last one.
Just for the record, that was the second time for Ernie Monaco on Mount
Really?
Rushmore. You
Who else
and
came?
Shane Griffith.
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
good.
That makes sense.
And
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah,
Shane, that's awesome. Again, I could sit there, and I've had conversations with Shane, and we were never in a wrestling room together. But it's like, we can relate to each other and have high level conversations, and kind of we can finish each other's sentences because of that stuff.
sure. All right. You might need a step stool though. All right. Last one. Hmm. Last one. You got a magic wand. You can change one thing about the sport of wrestling and it changes tomorrow. What would it be?
Well, I think the Ernie Monaco is a good segue into this, because it's not to me, it's not rules, it's not anything. I think wrestling is a really unique sport in which there hasn't historically, been a lot of money or a huge outlet when you leave the sport. So by default, like, a lot of people did, at least historically, like, kind of get back into coaching. Then they
Mhm.
transition now into RTCs and now you're making a life out of wrestling for sure. I think athletic departments view the best wrestlers as the best coaches. I think fans view the best wrestlers as the best coaches. Where I don't think Bill Belichick was the best football player. He's not going to be in the Hall of
So,
Fame for his prowess on the field, as an athlete, right? So I think there's this misconception of, like, oh, that guy, I have to go here. I have to go there because that guy was a winner. That guy's a terrible leader and a developer of men and of a program. You brought up Lee. Doug Schwab has done a great job. I think there are so many great coaches involved in Division I wrestling right now. Um, and I don't think that they might never get their shot to really prove how great they are. There are great coaches. I was talking to someone earlier today. I know he's a great coach. Um, but he can't quite get his foothold back in Division I wrestling. And it's sad to me because there are people in those seats that I don't want to say don't belong or don't deserve it. Everyone deserves it in their own right. But either way, I mean, to me, I would change this perception of the best wrestlers are the best coaches, and they have to be. And there are certainly examples that dispute that, right? But I don't think
I would say that there are even more exceptions to that rule than there are examples of that rule, right?
Yeah.
Like there are so many coaches that I've been around that were not the best wrestlers. But because they found a way to win, because they had to find different avenues to be successful, it's a whole lot easier to teach that, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's something that has always, since I was young, and I made my college decision for certain reasons, and maybe it's present on my mind because it's June 17th and recruiting just opened up for a new class. But it always boggles my mind as far as like people see what they want to believe, and perception is reality. The perception in this sport is a little skewed incorrectly, in my opinion. And there's a lot of places you can go and be successful. Virginia Tech's one of them. You can go and be successful, but it's for other reasons. Why we're successful is more about what we're actually doing on the inside than what people think on the outside.
It's a fair point, sir. Zach Tanelli, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and imparting some wisdom on us.
Not much wisdom, but you give me a microphone, I'll talk,
Fair enough. All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Wait. Don't go anywhere before you hit that next button. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.